G'day, welcome to this series investigating Jesus Christ. Together we will explore the life of the most amazing person who ever lived, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. What were these people chosen for? As we read these gospel accounts of Jesus, we can clearly see and know that the disciples often got things wrong. Jesus often had to rebuke them, such as when the storm hit when they were in the boat. Jesus rebuked them for panicking, Mark 4 verse 38, and for fearing and lacking faith, Mark 4 verse 40. This the disciples were doing despite having seen Jesus do the things he had done. In Matthew's Gospel, the disciples mistake him for a ghost as he walked to them on the water, Matthew chapter 14 verses 22 to 36, and Jesus rebukes Peter for lacking faith as Peter had looked at the storm, Matthew 14 verse 30, rather than to Jesus himself as Peter was walking on the water. Another instance is when Peter, one of Jesus' closest friends, tried to dissuade Jesus from going to the cross. Jesus' subsequent rebuke was meant for all the disciples and not just Peter, Mark 8 verse 33. They did not yet understand the relationship between suffering and glory. Later in his life, by the time Peter had written the letter we know in our Bible as 1 Peter, he most assuredly did know. In calling them to himself, Jesus called these people into a common discipleship of which they were to love one another. John 15 verse 17. The reason for this is so that people would know that they were his disciples by and through their love for one another. John 13 verse 34, John 15 verse 16, and this would then produce the desired fruit for God's kingdom and an effective prayer life. John 15 verse 16. What demands does Jesus make on those who choose to follow him? Just as Jesus did for his original 12 disciples, the people we know as his apostles, Jesus makes upon all those who choose to follow him. He makes demands, including those of us in the 21st century. We know that disciples are called regardless of background. The disciples themselves were from a broad cross-section of society: fishermen, tax collectors, who were thought of as traitors to Israel, and others were zealots or sons of zealots. They were called to a life of repentance, and symbolic of this is Peter, who, when first encountering Jesus in Luke 5 verse 1 to 11, declared of Jesus, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." Thirdly, called to a life of service. When they were sent out in Matthew chapter 10, the disciples were to tell the good news, heal the sick, raise the dead, drive out demons, and freely give. They were called of a life of obedience to Jesus. Jesus called for obedience of God, and this obedience means to follow Jesus in all areas of life. Matthew chapter 7 verse 21 and Luke 6 verse 46. And finally, Jesus commands all those who follow him to take up their cross. In Matthew chapter 16 verse 24, Jesus called his disciples to take up their own cross, just as he was going to be taking up his cross at Calvary. By this, Jesus meant that all those who must follow him must be prepared to sacrifice, to suffer, and die for him. If the demands are made like this, how can a Christian disciple, a follower of this Jesus, actually do them? To find out the answer to that, you'll have to come back next time. That's it for this week. Next Sunday we continue on looking at the evidences outside of the Bible for the existence of Jesus Christ. And come back every day to Partakers Podcasts to learn more about how you can live as a disciple of Jesus Christ in the 21st century. See you later.